Hello. Can you hear me?
Hello, Dylan. Yeah, we're good.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. My name is Dylan Sutton. I work with Vaco here in Birmingham, Alabama.
And I'm Meagan Krift with Vaco Cincinnati.
And we are coming to you again on LinkedIn Live. And we want to thank everyone for tuning in. I guess it was 2 weeks ago. We received, a lot of great feedback, and I think we're going to try and do a segment every other week now until, I guess until we're all back on our feet and doing normal life again. So thanks to everyone for all your comments, suggestions, feedback. Honestly, it was a little bit overwhelming. So we're going to try and make sure that we're doing this in a very constructive and helpful way. Several great suggestions last week in the comments, and so I was going to take a minute to highlight a couple of those. Meagan?
Yeah, so something that, and again, my lens as a working parent during this situation, I'm working under the same roof as my husband, working full time, and we have 3 kids, twins that are 6, and our youngest just turned 2 over the weekend. So that is the lens at which I can share my experience with you all, and we are very aware that by no means is this a one-size-fit-all situation for anyone. We all have a very unique setup, and that today is really the lens that I'll be sharing with you. So one of the feedback suggestions that we got last week was talking about making sure throughout your workday that you kind of set your kids up with unique work for them as well. So let's say you do have a meeting put on your calendar unexpectedly, or something that you have to step away to take care of business wise. If you already have those like pre-made either workstations or work activities, and kind of can pull those out sort of on the fly, it helps to be able to get to your meeting and have some pseudo dedicated time for them to be on their own.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And, for those of us with toddlers, realistically, I think it's always going to be pretty hit or miss situation with them. You just try different things and you stick with what works because, let's face it, we're lucky to get 5 good minutes out of any one activity with them. I'll admit that I'm not that familiar with Pinterest, but I see it suggested a lot for all sorts of, different sensory type activities for the toddlers. Even just Googling things, I found like one of the things I shared recently was just a simple plastic bottle with loose straws inside it. I mean, it moves, it makes noise, it makes a small mess. The kids love it. My wife is probably watching on her phone right now and rolling her eyes like, welcome to the future, honey, Pinterest.
But she's proud of you. I'm sure she's proud of you.
That got dropped a lot in the comment section. And so I checked it out, and no doubt there are a lot of great little things to occupy the little ones because, you literally get just a handful of minutes in between.
And we do realize too, sorry, Dylan.
Go ahead.
There's a lot of resources, I think, initially too. It's like, working from home. How do you do it well? How do you do it well if you have kids? The resources coming at us are overwhelming, as we mentioned. So that's why we're going to drop a few links in this session so that you can go to those afterwards as well. But two that neither Dylan and I were familiar with was PBS Learning, has education from kindergarten all the way up through high school, as well as Brain Pop. Again, nothing that I had experienced yet, but as I teased, in the spirit of togetherness and trying anything, I'm going to try those out this week.
That's good. That's good. And, we talked about it again, an overwhelming response, thousands of viewers, hundreds of comments. And we want to make sure that first and foremost, or at least I want to make sure that we're providing the right type of support for everyone, because that's really how I mentioned that I view this. It's a sort of a support group in some pseudo sort of way. We recognize that all situations are different. All families are different, kids different ages, jobs different. So absolutely, we recognize that one size fits all, and by no means are we trying to say, here's the recipe to solve all the problems. I just wanted to speak to that because I could tell that, some of the things last week weren't speaking to everyone. So again, the whole purpose of this is really, to use my term from last week, you're not alone. And I've learned since then, after going through all those comments and just talking to colleagues and whatnot, there's a lot of us. And, I think that getting together like this, and even if there's just one aha moment that any of you take from any of this back and forth banter, it'll be worth it. So in that same sort of vein of support, I'll just ask you, kind of going back on some of the things we talked about last week. What do you feel you did right this week, Meagan, or the past 2 weeks?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. No, and I have to laugh,
sure.
right? Like, I'm not sure, right? And I think there's a moment of just realness in all of this, and I'm sure each of us has experienced it differently. That we never thought we'd be put in this situation, and obviously we are so grateful to have careers in what we do and put people to work. But I never thought I'd also be doing my job with my 3 small children. So I have to find those moments of levity and comedic relief a little bit for my own sanity's sake. But from doing things right, from right when this started, I segmented my day. I was very strict about my kid time to be as productive as possible. And I still have those buckets throughout the day. So 6 to 9, 12 to 2, 4 to 6. I don't have the children with me. I realize, Bill, your situation is very different than that because your wife is working outside of the home as a nurse. So again, that won't work for everyone. But what I've done differently, and I will say I think it's right, is this week in particular, I've kind of loosened up a bit and I've blended those periods of time, and I'm funneling more productive work while my kids are around me, and I'm keeping them occupied, and I'm forging forward, and I think because we don't know what the timeline of this is, I think that's the only thing we can do is just keep forging forward. And that's been working really, really well for me. And the other thing too that I have done right, again, do we all know what we're doing right? As a parent, that's like the big question.
It's a relative term.
Right? Thank you. It's a very relative term. But to that point, the other thing too that I feel like I'm doing right is embracing my time as a family unit, right? So even today, all 5 of us were in the kitchen around lunchtime, and it was chaotic, let's be honest, because we're kind of transitioning between my kid free time and my husband's work schedule and the 3 kids and nap time and all the things. But it was nice during that time. Like, we are working together as a team and as a family unit so well. So I know that is right.
That's great.
And refreshing.
That's great. If you weren't battle tested before, you are now.
Yes. I'll leave it. That's a different segment.
No, I mean, I'm glad I asked you that question because I wouldn't want to answer it. And even if I did, I couldn't answer it any better. I think right is relative. I think that what I'm learning, and I'm really just riffing here, is, you kind of get comfortable in the chaos, so to speak. And again, you just do what works. I think when we first started doing this, I tried to build that structure, and it's like, all right, now I'm going to have this block of time to do X and this block of time to do Y. That was 3 weeks of more or less total failure because I just can't build around it. So finding what works, being kind to yourself, finding humor in the whole situation. If you can't laugh, you're going to lose your mind. So you got to find some humor in it. I think that's good. So that's something that I guess we did right next week.
Yes, let's keep it up. Finding those little wins. Another question: what is something parents can do to help themselves recenter? And again, when we were talking earlier, I loved what you said. How do you recenter yourself amongst this?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, some are more obvious than others. I'll speak just from my own experience, and I'm sure that this probably will speak to some viewers. For others, maybe not. But one of the things that I've found that has really sort of brought my mind back to a happier place, or at least a more normal feeling place, is when I do check out, or even when I just want to have a few minutes, reaching out to a client or a colleague even, or someone just outside of your family, and having or outside of my family, I forgot I was speaking first person here, and having a professional conversation, a business conversation. I mean, it doesn't have to be a sales call. It doesn't have to be, obviously we're in recruiting, doesn't have to be a recruiting type of call, but just talking about something business related, or at least at a professional manner, outside of my spouse or partner, outside of my kids, it brings me back. And I think that might not be profound. In fact, I don't think it is, but I will say, when you're fighting an 18-month-old and a 5-year-old, and you're on top of each other, and it just seems like within 30 minutes your mood has changed from what it was. I have to recognize that and then pivot. And so what I would do is, maybe not from a scheduling perspective, because we just tackled how tough that can be, but just picking up the phone and reaching out to someone and connecting. Even if it's just a colleague you haven't spoken to in a few days, it helps me a lot. And I think it's often overlooked. I think we just kind of get into our groove and try to muscle through everything. Just pick up the phone and have a different sort of conversation. It helps tremendously.
Absolutely.
What about you?
Yeah. And again, I go back to that whole recentering thing, right? As a working mom, I always had my commutes, right? So like I left the mothering, and went to work, that's what I did every day. And there's no leaving it right now. So I'm finding ways to embrace that for what it is, and soaking in some of those very, very special moments that I don't normally get to experience with my family. But when it just becomes too much for me, what I found is like, we have to get out of the house, right? So we're not going anywhere, but we have a very short block, like a very short walk. So I get the kids on the scooters or the bikes, the little one in her little cart, and it's maybe not even 10 minutes, but we're outside. No one's touching each other. I'm breathing, I'm taking very deep breaths, and it just brings me back to a place of calm and ready to re-enter the workplace, which is the home,
Right. No, I think that's great. We've been fortunate to have fantastic weather here in Birmingham almost throughout this entire 4 weeks or so, give or take a couple of nights. And that's been hugely beneficial, just getting out, getting fresh air, stretching your legs. And again, I think there's a lot of psychology involved in getting through this sort of mess, and a lot of mental strength, right? And so finding whatever that is, I know that there's a lot of exercise people out there. I'm not one of them, but if I was, I would be seeking that out, of course, and I probably should anyway. But I think that you find what works, like I mentioned with entertaining the toddlers. You find what works and you stick with it. And when it fails, you tweak it, and you just kind of go from there. And I think that the wins, just like the days are piling up, the wins will start to pile up if you create those healthy habits. And hey, I see your finger on the screen.
Sorry, what have I done?
And just finding some sort of routine, but not making it so rigid that when it falls apart, you're disheveled. Does that make sense?
Lost. Absolutely. What I was trying to do, and I apologize, I was cutting in and out last time, so I switched to my phone. I don't see our chat. Do we have any questions, or are there any questions that we want to address at this time?
That's a good question. I don't see any.
It's a good question.
Maybe
we're going off the cuff then. But I think again, how I teased my recruitment of Dylan to co-host this session with me was simply that, as we go through this, we don't know when the end is, right? That's the big question. We don't know what the other side of this looks like. And I think forming community as working parents, working mothers, working fathers, every household is different. Every child situation is different. But the concept that you have a community here and we're opening ourselves up and engaging and here to help in any way that we can. Again, we'll drop some resources below this. And is there anything else that we wanted to address today?
I mean, I'm sure
we're going to keep it shorter.
What's that? Sorry, there's a little bit of delay.
We were going to keep it shorter. We were going to tighten our time frame for everyone's sake.
I see a question come across about, explaining kind of the current state of affairs to kids. And, I can imagine that's a very sensitive, a potentially sensitive matter for kids that are old enough to understand. Fortunately, you know, at my level of parenting, no more than 5 years at this point, they don't quite understand. The little one definitely doesn't. And my daughter just knows what the coronavirus is. And, you know, she's chugging along just fine. And I will say that, you know, and this again, just kind of riffing here, when I see that out of her, the fluidity, the flexibility, the natural sort of just rolling with the punches, this is the new normal. I don't know if inspiring is the right word, but it's certainly noteworthy, you know, and it makes me remind myself everything's going to be fine, and this is going to be okay. So, you know, I don't know how I would explain it to a teenager necessarily, especially one that maybe has had their senior year affected or something that sensitive. But I certainly see positives in how the young children handle the changes. And I just try and set a good example and a good sort of pace and tempo.
I think that's so important, Dylan. And I think, you know, as parents, right, that's one of our, again, that's our greatest responsibility, right? Of how we're raising our children. That's what I always feel, you know, and right now they're watching everything, you know, and I tease, like, I actually put it on my Instagram story earlier this week. My daughter, so my 6-year-old daughter, set up this huge stuffed bear, and she made a makeshift desk with like our wireless keyboard upstairs next to mine. You know, so they've always been watching, but now they're seeing us do what we do, and there is it's neat, you know. And I'm very honest. I'm learning from them daily, you know. And I tease, we've labeled my youngest the quarantine queen, my 2-year-old, because she is living her very best life right now. She really is. But it's neat. And again, it's time that I'll never get back with her. So focusing on that positive and the silver lining as well.
Yeah, that's great. And you kind of touched on something else that we've discussed internally, and I won't run through names or call anyone out, but I'll say that on my team and in our office, you know, we have several touch points throughout the week just to try to, you know, keep close with everyone and feel some sense of normalcy. And we talked about, you know, the best things of the past 2 weeks. And there's so many different ideas and so many different things that could make you smile. But sort of the underlying theme, I think, that everybody's getting to now, 4 weeks, 5 weeks in, is the love and appreciation of that time spent. I know it's not always easy, but you're right. I think that whenever this is all said and done with, of course, there's going to be some scars and some poor memories, but there's also going to be a lot of really positive ones, and hopefully things that you remember fondly that we wouldn't normally get to do when we're in the office or wherever we are 8 to 10 hours a day. Here's a great question that just came through, and I'll throw it to you first. But when you're doing family all the time, especially with the young kids, how do you keep family time fun? Minus
that's great. Yeah, family time fun. So again, I think, again, my lens, I have 2 6-year-olds, right? So like that in itself is kind of always fun. But we have dance parties. If you haven't already seen, like tonight, don't tell them, but there's a Disney live sing along. I think I might be more excited than my kids, although I do plan on recording it, and we're going to watch it tomorrow, but don't tell them that. But, you know, doing something different, right? So like we've done, you know, you've done the forts, and just asking them, like, what do you want to do? Right. I'm so impressed. My 6-year-old son, like, he's doing puzzles, like big puzzles with my husband, and like we found them very therapeutic. So doing things that are different. I let them paint. I let them paint rocks out back, right? Like they really wanted to paint. I didn't want it in the kitchen. I was like, here's some rocks, and just go paint outside, you know? And so I think at that age, right? So like everything is still so new and fresh as a 6-year-old, you know? And as I tease, the 2-year-old just along for the ride. This is literally the most fun she's ever had. So, but making sure that I'm aware of my own my own, emotions and whatnot, so that I'm not bringing those to family fun time, right? That I'm closing those with my laptop and that I'm staying family focused with them.
No, that's good. That's good. And um, making sure that you keep the energy as positive as you can around them. Our 5-year-old is certainly the pace setter in the house. The 18-month-old feeds off the 5-year-old, and make no mistake, the 5-year-old feeds off of us. So I've I've always been comfortable with being silly and goofy, but I've certainly found fun in dance parties, fun in I've used crayons more in the past month than I probably did in a couple of different years of school combined. It's therapeutic for me. I haven't done puzzles yet, but we're certainly getting back to the basics of board games and just silly stuff, really silly stuff. Find some peace and comfort in that, and the days pile up, and hopefully, just to kind of bring it full circle, hopefully we'll all be looking at this in a rearview mirror sooner than later. And on that note, we'll also be looking forward, I guess, doing this again in 2 more weeks. We'll hopefully have some additional questions and things to address. Again, guys and girls, I don't know if anything we share or say is going to be the ticket, right? Or profound in any way. For lack of better words, I see this, like I said earlier, as just a support group and the ability to chat and know that you're not alone. So
thank you.
Anything else you'd like to add?
No, just thank you for joining us, and reach out if you need anything or you have questions, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Likewise. Thanks, guys. Hope everyone's doing well.
Thank you. Bye.